As a teacher, my students always ask me, when will I ever need this in life? This is so irrelevant, all right? Which is a question that slightly infuriates me because I know that they don't see the bigger picture. So I explain it to them and I tell them to have faith that everything that we're trying to teach them will, at least most of it, will have some sort of everyday relevance, okay? And this topic in particular is a perfect example. Today we're going to be delving into financial maths, okay? And more specifically looking at the difference between simple interest and compound interest, okay? So let's have a look first at their formulas. The simple interest formula is I equals PRN, all right? Now let's understand what each of those components mean. The I stands for interest. Okay, so the interest that you will get, okay, on your principal. Okay, now the principal is just defined as the money that you're starting with, okay? So how much money you're starting with. The rate is a percentage, okay? The rate at which this interest will be charged. And then you've also got N, which stands for the number of periods, okay? So is this principal being invested at a rate? Is it only being invested for a year, for a month, 5 years, 10 years, and all of that will depend on will dictate how much interest comes out of the loan or of the investment. So now that we've dissected this formula, I equals PRN, let's use this question to put it to practice. So Charlie invested $3,000 on a fixed rate of 2% per annum for 5 years. Now, there's a few key words here. Fixed rate, okay, is the question telling you that it's a simple interest question, a fixed rate, it's not going to change, okay? Per annum. Per annum is the mathematical and usually associated with financial maths way of saying that it's going to get, this Charlie is going to get 2% per year. Per annum means per year. Okay, so at the end of every year, the bank's going to look at how much money Charlie has and give him a 2% interest on that, essentially. Okay, and it's going to be a fixed amount that goes into Charlie's account every single year for 5 years. Okay, so how much interest did he earn? Well, let's use our formula. The interest that he earned, I, equals the principal, which is $3,000. He put in $3,000 into this bank account at a rate of 2%. Okay, for a number of 5 years. Now, if you put this into your calculator, excluding the dollar sign, you'll get an answer of $300. So Charlie made $300 by doing nothing but having his money in the bank account. So this is one type of question you may see associated with simple interest. The second type of question is, what was his balance at the end of 5 years? In other words, if Charlie went to look at how much money he had after 5 years, what would that number be? Really simply, it's just adding what he started with the amount of interest that the bank gave him. So the balance is going to be his principal plus his interest, okay? So in this case, it's literally just going to be the 3,000 plus 300. So his answer here is going to be $3,300 was what was in his bank account, okay? Now, let's jump over to compound interest. Compound interest is slightly different. So the formula for compound interest is A equals P1 plus RN. Kind of has the same letters to a degree that this formula has, alrighty? So let's discuss the ones that are different and the same, okay? Now, A stands for amount. An amount is the amount of money that will be in, let's per se, Jordan's account at the end of however long he's investing his money or paying off the loan. So we have the amount. P stands for the same thing it did over here, which is the principal, or the amount of money that we start with. Okay, again, your R is your rate, and N, number of periods that the money is being invested in or the loan is being paid off on. Okay, number of period there. Number of period or periods, I guess. Alrighty, so amount equals principal, 1 plus the rate and the number of periods. Now, as a rule of thumb, if you were to invest the same amount of money at the same rate for the same number of years, which are all the variables in these equations, compound interest will give you a better return, which means the amount of money in your account at the end of the number of periods will be better if you are getting compounded interest. And the reason being is that compound interest takes into account the interest that the bank gives you on a year-to-year basis or a term-by-term basis. So what does that mean? This fixed interest or simple interest will give Charlie the same amount of money every single year. Nothing impacts that at all. Compound interest, on the other hand, will give Jordan a little bit of money at the first year that he invests his money, and then they'll recalculate how much interest they're going to give him the next year based on his principal plus the interest they've given him, which means they're giving him interest on the interest that they've already given him. So essentially, the amount of interest he gets is bigger, okay? It's compounded on, it's stacked upon each other. It is not fixed, it grows every single year. So, compound interest here, we have the formula. Let's test this theory. So, Jordan invested the same amount, $3,000. It's compounded annually, it's compounded every single year at a rate of 2% for 5 years. So the exact same situation, except this is compounded annually. So let's use our formula, okay? Now it says, how much interest did he earn? Well, let's figure it out. The amount equals the principal, which is $3,000. He at 1 plus the rate of 2% for 5 years, like that. Now the amount equals, if you put that into your calculator there, 3,312.2424. Now let's have a think about that for a second. That doesn't make sense. He invested the same amount of money. He only got $300 interest, and he got $3,300 interest. I know I said compound interest was better. It's not that much better. So what we need to remember is something super important that a lot of students forget. This formula finds you the interest. The compound interest formula finds you the total amount of the fund, of the loan, of the bank account, the balance at the end of the term. So this figure here is actually the balance at the end of 5 years. So straight away we can almost go, you know what, we know what that answer is going to be. And we know we say money to 2 decimal places, so we're going to round it. And that's going to be the balance. So the question is, well then how do we find just the interest? Well, it's kind of the opposite to what we did down here. Down here we added the principal to the interest. In this case, we're actually going to subtract the principal to figure out what the interest component was. So what we do is we minus, okay, the initial amount of $3,000, and we get the interest component, which is $312.24. So just by a comparison, if you were asked who was a smarter investor, okay, you would say that Jordan's a smarter investor because he ended up getting $12.24 more than Charlie did by investing into a compound interest account. Alrighty? So, both of these, same questions, different results. You've got to remember what the question's asking. Once you understand the formula and you understand which parts of the questions go into the formula, it's not that hard to manage, okay? As always, try as many questions as you can. Get used to the different wording. Different textbooks, different exams will word things differently. They may say a fixed rate. They may use the term simple interest. Get familiar with it, okay? And as always, if you have any questions at all, speak to your tutor.